Have you ever walked through a city and felt like you've stepped back in time, that the buildings around you, the very air you breathe, carries whispers of centuries long gone? History has a funny way of circling back, sneaking into our modern world when we least expect it. From towering skyscrapers that mirror ancient temples to political strategies ripped straight from the playbooks of long-dead rulers, the past doesn't just fade away, it lingers, waiting for the perfect moment to resurface. And when it does, it's nothing short of spellbinding. Take a moment to consider the grand structures around you, the sleek lines of a government building, the ornate arches of a train station. Do they feel familiar? That's because architects and designers have been borrowing from history for centuries, whether they realize it or not. The neoclassical columns of Washington, D.C. owe their grandeur to ancient Greece and Rome. Even the brutalist concrete monoliths of the mid-20th century echo the stark fortresses of medieval Europe. But it's not just bricks and mortar. The very strategies used by today's leaders, propaganda, alliances, even psychological warfare, were perfected hundreds, sometimes thousands of years ago. The past isn't just a shadow, it's a blueprint. This is the heart of our journey today. 30 times the past echoed in modern times, moments where history didn't just inspire but outright repeated itself. Some of these echoes are haunting, others awe-inspiring, but all of them will make you see the world differently. How many times have we unknowingly walked in the footsteps of those who came before us? How many of our so-called innovations are just rediscoveries? By the end of this exploration, you'll start spotting these echoes everywhere in the streets you walk, the news you read, even the stories you tell. So let's dive in, because the past isn't done with us yet. In fact, it might just be writing our future. Ever notice how some highways seem to stretch endlessly in near-perfect straight lines? That's no accident. It's a 2,000-year-old idea borrowed straight from the Roman Empire. The ancient Romans didn't just build roads, they engineered a backbone for their civilization, and we've been following their lead ever since. Their roads were marvels of durability, layered with crushed stone, compacted gravel, and even volcanic ash to create surfaces so sturdy, some still exist today. Modern highway construction, it's strikingly similar. Engineers still use layered materials for stability and that unmistakable straight path design. Pure Roman practicality. They knew the fastest route between 2 points was a straight line, and today's interstates prove they were right, but the real shocker. Archaeologists have uncovered sections of Roman roads buried beneath modern highways, like hidden blueprints waiting to be rediscovered. Take the Via Appia, Rome's legendary queen of roads. Stretching from Rome to Brindisi, its route aligns eerily with parts of Italy's modern SS7 highway. Even more astonishing, core samples from asphalt roads in Britain have revealed Roman foundations beneath them, like ghostly imprints of the past refusing to fade. It's not just about materials or paths, though. The Romans understood something deeper. Roads weren't just for travel, they were tools of control, trade, and connection. Sound familiar? Today's highways serve the same purpose, moving armies during crises, fueling economies through shipping, and stitching cities together. From the cobblestones of antiquity to the roaring interstates of today, the past didn't just echo, it paved the way. That dramatic cat eye you see on runways and social media. It's not just a modern trend, it's a 3,000-year-old beauty secret stolen straight from the tombs of Egyptian royalty. Ancient Egyptians didn't just wear kohl eyeliner for its striking look. They believed it had mystical and medicinal powers, and modern science is now catching up to what they knew all along. The iconic almond-shaped eyes of Cleopatra weren't just fashion. They were armor against the harsh desert sun and a shield against infections. Today's beauty gurus might not realize they're channeling the pharaohs every time they swipe on a liquid liner, but the connection is undeniable. Dig deeper and you'll find even more echoes. Egyptian makeup kits included crushed beetles for lip stain, red ochre for blush, and even early versions of eyeshadow made from malachite and lapis lazuli. Sound familiar? Scroll through any influencer's vanity today, and you'll spot the same obsession with bold pigments and natural ingredients. But here's the twist: modern labs have confirmed what ancient Egyptians practiced instinctively. Coal, traditionally made from galena or soot, contains trace amounts of lead salts which, in controlled doses, actually boost the immune response around delicate eye tissues. Studies now show it may have helped prevent eye infections in the Nile's bacteria-rich environment. The real kicker: high-end beauty brands are capitalizing on this ancient wisdom without always giving credit. Luxe products now tout mineral-based liners and healing formulas, but they're essentially repackaging the same recipes found in hieroglyphic makeup tutorials. Even the double liner trend, thick black coal paired with a shimmering gold or turquoise accent, is a direct homage to the frescoes of Nefertiti. From the way we contour our cheekbones to the emphasis on bold brows, modern beauty standards are unwittingly resurrecting the very ideals carved into temple walls millennia ago. The next time you perfect your winged liner, remember, you're not just following a trend, you're inscribing yourself into a legacy that stretches back further than the pyramids. The idea of democracy isn't new, it's ancient, and yet somehow we still struggle to perfect it. Over 2,000 years ago, in the shadow of the Acropolis, the citizens of Athens gathered to debate, vote, and shape their society directly. No representatives, no middlemen, just ordinary people ruling themselves. Fast forward to today, and while our systems are more complex, the DNA of Athenian democracy still pulses through modern governance. Take jury duty, for example. The concept of peers judging peers, that's pure Athens. The idea that ordinary citizens, not just elites, should have a say in justice. It was revolutionary then and remains foundational now, but the echoes don't stop there. The US Senate, with its debates and filibusters, mirrors the Athenian boule, where elected officials deliberated laws before presenting them to the assembly. Even the word democracy itself comes from the Greek demos, people, and kratos, power, literally, power to the people. And while modern democracies use representatives instead of direct participation, the spirit is the same: governance by consent of the governed. The European Parliament, with its transnational debates, even recreates the pan-Hellenic discussions of ancient Greek city-states, where delegates from across the region would negotiate alliances and policies. Yet the most striking parallel might be the flaws we've inherited. Athenian democracy excluded women, slaves, and non-citizens, a glaring contradiction to its ideals. Sound familiar? Modern democracies have grappled with voter suppression, gerrymandering, and unequal representation for centuries. The past doesn't just give us blueprints for greatness, it hands us the same battles too. The difference: we have the chance to learn from history's mistakes if we choose to listen. Long before picket signs and collective bargaining agreements, medieval artisans were already perfecting the art of organized labor. The craft guilds of the Middle Ages weren't just social clubs, they were powerhouses of worker solidarity, setting standards that modern unions still follow. Picture this: a young apprentice in 14th century Florence, sweating over a loom for years under a master weaver's watchful eye, just to earn the right to sell his own cloth. That rigorous training system, it's alive and well today in everything from electricians' unions to Hollywood's apprentice programs, but the parallels run deeper than skills training. Guilds controlled wages, regulated quality, and even provided benefits like pensions and health care for members. Sound familiar? What's truly startling are the historical strikes that could have been ripped from today's headlines. In 1345, the bakers of Paris staged a citywide walkout over grain prices, mirroring modern protests against inflation. Venetian glassblowers in the 1500s formed secret alliances to demand fair pay, risking exile or worse, echoing the clandestine meetings of Amazon warehouse organizers today. Even the tactics haven't changed much. Medieval masons would deliberately slow work to pressure employers, a strategy now called a slow-down strike. The biggest difference: medieval guilds held terrifying leverage, their knowledge. A stonemason's guild could withhold the secret of cathedral construction, just as tech unions today might control critical coding skills. That power dynamic, workers versus those who profit from their labor, hasn't shifted as much as we'd like to think. When Chicago teachers strike for smaller class sizes or Uber drivers organize for better pay, they're walking the same path medieval cobblers once did. Only now, instead of parchment petitions, they've got hashtags and viral videos. The tools change, but the fight remains. The glow of a smartphone screen and the flicker of a Renaissance candle might seem worlds apart, but the techniques that brought Mona Lisa to life are the same ones shaping your favorite video games and blockbuster films. Chiaroscuro, that dramatic play of light and shadow perfected by Da Vinci and Caravaggio, wasn't just a stylistic choice. It was emotional alchemy, a way to make flat surfaces pulse with depth and drama. Today's digital artists wield virtual brushes with the same precision, using software to replicate the exact fall of light that once required painstaking layers of oil paint. Zoom in on a character from a Pixar film or a AAA video game, and you'll see the fingerprints of 15th century masters, the soft halo of rim lighting, the way shadows pool beneath a jawline to sculpt dimensionality. But the real magic happens with perspective. Filippo Brunelleschi's groundbreaking linear perspective, the math that made paintings feel like windows into other worlds, is now the backbone of every 3D modeling program. When animators plot vanishing points in Maya or Blender, they're using the same geometric principles that once transformed Florentine churches into dizzying illusions of heaven. Compare a technical blueprint from the Sistine Chapel's ceiling to a modern 3D storyboard, and the grids are nearly identical. Even the rule of thirds, that ubiquitous photography guideline, traces back to Renaissance compositional studies. Here's where it gets surreal. Digital tools now automate what took artists months to calculate, yet the human eye still craves those imperfect, handcrafted touches. That's why studios like Studio Ghibli and Leica deliberately mimic the texture of brushstrokes in their animations, layering digital noise to recreate the grain of canvas. The next time you lose yourself in a hyper-realistic video game cutscene, remember, you're not just seeing cutting-edge tech. You're witnessing a dialogue across 600 years, where every shadow, every angle whispers secrets first unlocked by artists who never dreamed of pixels. The sea was their cosmos, vast, unknown, and brimming with terrors that would make most men turn back. Yet the Vikings didn't just brave the open ocean, they thrived in it, pushing farther into the abyss than anyone thought possible. Their longships, sleek and nimble, were the spaceships of their age, lightweight yet sturdy, designed to navigate uncharted waters with nothing but stars and instincts as guides. Fast forward 1,000 years, and that same restless spirit fuels our journey into the stars. NASA Mars rovers might not have sails or oars, but they carry the essence of Viking exploration: ingenious, resilient, and utterly alone in the void. Consider the parallels. Viking ships were built for adaptability, with shallow drafts that let them sail up rivers or cross open seas. Similarly, Mars rovers like Perseverance are designed to pivot on a dime, navigating alien terrain with autonomous precision. Both ventures demanded extreme resourcefulness. Vikings repurposed everything from walrus ivory to seal fat for survival, while NASA engineers jury-rig solutions with duct tape and reprogrammable code when missions stretch beyond their original scope. Remember the Mars helicopter ingenuity. Its blades had to be redesigned last minute to cope with the planet's thin atmosphere, a problem Eric the Red would have understood when patching his ship's hull with tar-soaked wool. But the most striking echo is the mindset. Viking sagas recount explorers who sailed west knowing they might never return, driven by sheer curiosity. Sound familiar? Every Mars mission carries that same gamble, billions invested, years of planning, all riding on a single landing. The Vikings had their land nom, the claiming of new territory. We have our flags planted in regolith. Even the language overlaps. NASA teams speak of bearing and waypoints, terms ripped straight from nautical navigation. And just as Vikings relied on oral traditions to pass down knowledge, modern missions archive every byte of data for future generations of explorers. Here's what history whispers: exploration isn't about the tools. It's about the audacity to venture into the dark, armed with nothing but ingenuity and grit. Whether it's a longship cresting a wave at the edge of the world or a rover drilling into Martian rock, the human impulse remains unchanged. The Vikings didn't have satellites or solar panels, but they'd recognize the fire in our eyes when we say, "What's next?" The stars, it turns out, are just another ocean waiting to be crossed. The samurai may have vanished from Japan's battlefield centuries ago, but their code, Bushido, never left. It simply traded swords for suits, infiltrating the boardrooms and factories of modern corporations with the same unshakable principles. At its core, Bushido wasn't just about warfare. It was a blueprint for living with honor, and today it shapes everything from Toyota's assembly lines to the unspoken rules of salaryman culture. Loyalty to one's company, that's chugi, the devotion samurai once showed their lords. The relentless pursuit of perfection in every task, meiyo, or personal honor, demanded nothing less. Take Toyota's famous Anden cord, a literal lifeline any worker can pull to halt production if they spot a flaw. That's not just efficiency, it's Bushido in action. In feudal Japan, a swordsmith would rather destroy a flawed blade than risk dishonoring his craft. Fast forward to today, and Toyota engineers apply that same pride, shutting down an entire line over a single misaligned bolt. The result, a reputation for quality so bulletproof, it's become the global gold standard. Even the company's obsession with Kaizen, or continuous improvement, mirrors the samurai's daily sword drills, small, incremental refinements that compound into mastery. But the influence runs deeper than policies. The entire concept of lifetime employment, once a hallmark of Japanese firms, stems from the feudal bond between samurai and clan. Employees didn't just work for a paycheck, they pledged allegiance, and companies reciprocated with paternalistic care, housing subsidies, family benefits, even matchmaking services. While globalization has eroded some traditions, the ethos remains. When Mitsubishi Heavy Industries faced a scandal over falsified data in 2017, its CEO didn't just apologize. He bowed so deeply his forehead nearly touched the floor, a gesture straight from the era of seppuku. Here's where it gets fascinating. Western firms now clamor to adopt these principles, often missing the cultural roots. Silicon Valley preaches fail fast, but Bushido teaches that failure isn't an option, not out of rigidity, but because every action reflects on your character. Starbucks baristas in Tokyo will refuse tips not out of policy, but because accepting unearned reward violates Makoto or sincerity. Even the way Japanese CEOs take pay cuts during crises while protecting rank and file jobs echoes the samurai's duty to shield those under their care. The lesson isn't about mimicking rituals, it's about integrity as a competitive edge. When a Honda engineer spends nights tweaking a door hinge to achieve the perfect thunk, he's not chasing a performance metric, he's honoring a centuries-old pact between craft and conscience. The swords are gone, but the code lives on, proving that the sharpest blade in business isn't profit but principle. High in the Andes, where the air thins and the slopes seem to defy gravity, the Inca built farms that clung to mountainsides like staircases to the sky. Their terraces weren't just feats of engineering, they were masterclasses in sustainability, solving problems modern farmers still grapple with today. Those cascading steps of stone did more than create flat land. They transformed entire ecosystems, controlling erosion, conserving water, and even creating microclimates to extend growing seasons. Fast forward 500 years and you'll find permaculture pioneers copying these very techniques, proving that the best solutions sometimes come with a patina of age. Take the way Inca terraces handled water, a system so precise, it puts modern irrigation to shame. Each level had built-in drainage channels that directed rainfall downward, preventing floods while keeping soil moist. Today's permaculture farms use nearly identical swales, shallow trenches dug along contour lines to capture runoff. And just like the Inca, modern designers pair these with nitrogen-fixing plants like lupines, a practice Andean farmers called muyu or crop circles, to naturally enrich the soil without chemicals. The difference: now we have studies proving it works. Research in Peru shows terraced fields retain up to 90% more topsoil than sloped ones, exactly as the Inca intended. But the real genius lies in biodiversity. The Inca didn't just grow one crop per terrace. They stacked plants in vertical layers, corn shading quinoa, beans climbing stalks, potatoes nestled in lower tiers. It's a technique now dubbed polyculture, and it's revolutionizing sustainable agriculture. Farms from Vermont to Vietnam are adopting this ancient approach, finding that mixed crops attract fewer pests and yield more calories per acre than monocultures. Even the terrace's stone walls play a role. They absorb daytime heat, radiating it back at night to protect tender seedlings from frost, a trick modern greenhouses mimic with thermal mass walls. Perhaps the most striking echo is in Peru's Sacred Valley today, where Quechua farmers still tend terraces their ancestors built. Using the same tools, foot plows called chacuataclas, and woven baskets for hauling compost, they outproduce neighboring mechanized farms while using zero fossil fuels. Scientists call it agroecological resilience, but the farmers have a simpler term: INI, the Inca principle of reciprocity with the land. When a UN study found these terraces sequester more carbon than industrial farms. It wasn't just validating ancient wisdom, it was revealing a blueprint for feeding the future. The next time you see a rooftop garden or a vineyard carved into a hillside, look closely. Those curves and contours, they're speaking Quechua. Corsets were supposed to be relics, confining symbols of a repressed era, banished to museum exhibits and period dramas. Yet stroll through any fashion week today, and you'll spot their boned silhouettes towering over runways, reimagined in neon mesh or paired with ripped jeans. This isn't just retro chic, it's a full-blown Victorian Renaissance where crinolines puff beneath streetwear and lace gloves accessorize tech bro hoodies. The twist: modern designers aren't just copying the past, they're weaponizing it, using 19th century aesthetics to critique 21st century obsessions with body image and privacy. Take the corset's controversial comeback. Once vilified as an instrument of oppression, it's been reclaimed as a symbol of empowerment, quite literally. Designers like Vivienne Westwood and Alexander McQueen recast them as outerwear, their rigid structures framing rebellion rather than restraint. When Billie Eilish stepped onto the Met Gala red carpet in a corseted Oscar de la Renta gown, she wasn't submitting to old ideals, she was hijacking them, proving that control can be a choice. Even medical corsets, originally designed for spine support, now inspire waist trainers sold as glamorous self-care. Though historians might chuckle at the irony of Kardashian-endorsed garments mirroring 1860s orthopedic devices. But the revival runs deeper than silhouettes. High collars, once worn to signal modesty, now flare dramatically on TikTok influencers, their ruffles framing faces like Gothic halos. Victorian mourning jewelry, with its lockets of hair and black jet beads, inspires designers like Gucci to craft memento mori rings for the Instagram age. Even the parasol, a sun-shielding necessity for pale-complexioned Victorians, has resurfaced as a luxury umbrella for skincare fanatics, the through line. Nostalgia with a bite. These trends don't just reference history, they remix it, blending antique charm with modern subversion. Social media turbocharged this revival, turning archival snippets into viral aesthetics. Pinterest boards labeled dark academia romanticize Oxford scholars' tweed and cravats, while TikTok's cottagecore movement idealizes the pastoral lace and puffed sleeves of Jane Austen heroines. Yet there's a poignant tension beneath the hashtags. As algorithms flatten history into aesthetics, we risk glossing over the labor behind those stitches, the seamstresses who went blind sewing lace by gaslight, the child workers who starved weaving silk. When a $500 vintage-inspired blouse bears a "made ethically" tag, it's worth asking, whose ethics, whose vintage? The most telling echo lies in fashion's cyclical nature. Victorians themselves recycled styles, reviving Renaissance ruffles and medieval sleeves. Today's designers mirror that same restless borrowing, proving that every generation rediscovers the past to make sense of its present. The difference: our nostalgia isn't hand-stitched, it's algorithmically generated, a paradox of craving authenticity in a digital world. Next time you see a velvet choker or a bustle skirt, look closer. That's not just fabric, it's a conversation across centuries stitched together with threads of memory and reinvention. 4,000 years ago, beneath the scorching Mesopotamian sun, a diorite pillar stood in the heart of Babylon, etched with words that would echo through millennia. If a man destroys the eye of another man, they shall destroy his eye. Hammurabi's code might seem like ancient brutality at first glance, but crack open any modern legal textbook, and you'll find its DNA coiled through today's justice systems. That infamous eye for an eye principle, it's alive and well, just wearing a suit and tie. Start with property laws where the parallels are startling. Hammurabi's code laid out precise penalties for stolen livestock or damaged crops, calculating restitution down to the bushel. Fast forward to today, and civil courts still lean on that same logic. If your neighbor's negligence floods your basement, you're owed compensation, not vengeance. Even the concept of strict liability, where you're responsible for harm caused by your actions regardless of intent, traces straight back to Babylonian statutes holding builders accountable if their shoddy work collapsed a house. The punishment might not involve being thrown into the Euphrates anymore, but the underlying principle hasn't budged. But here's where it gets thorny. Modern retributive justice, from prison sentences to fines, mirrors Hammurabi's belief that punishment should fit the crime, a philosophy called lex talionis. When a court orders a corporate polluter to pay billions in damages, that's Babylonian math in a modern courtroom. Even small claims cases follow Hammurabi's playbook. If you break it, you buy it. The difference: we've swapped stone tablets for legal precedents, and instead of amputations, we garnish wages. Yet the most enduring echo is in what Hammurabi left out. His code distinguished between social classes, prescribing harsher penalties for harming elites than commoners. Sound familiar? Critics argue today's justice systems still skew along lines of wealth and power, whether it's bail reform debates or white-collar crimes versus street-level offenses. The past doesn't just give us legal frameworks, it holds up a mirror to our blind spots. The next time you hear an eye for an eye, don't just think of primitive retaliation. Think of contracts, tort law, even class action lawsuits, all descendants of a stone pillar that proved some truths about fairness are timeless. Babylon may be dust, but its laws still whisper in every gavel's fall. The camel caravans that once snaked across the deserts of Central Asia didn't just carry silk and spices. They wove the first threads of globalization, stitching together empires and economies in ways that feel eerily familiar today. What began as a trickle of trade between Xi'an and Rome blossomed into a sprawling network of routes where Persian silver bought Chinese porcelain, Indian cotton traded for Mediterranean glass, and ideas flowed as freely as goods. Fast forward to the 21st century, and those same routes hum with container ships and fiber optic cables, proving that the Silk Road never really vanished, it just upgraded its infrastructure. Take something as simple as your morning coffee. The beans might be roasted in Italy, grown in Ethiopia, and transported on ships owned by a Danish company, a modern echo of how Silk Road merchants moved cinnamon from Sri Lanka to Venice, passing through a dozen cultures along the way. Even the containers stacked on those ships mirror the camel loads of yore, standardized for efficiency just as Tang dynasty merchants used uniform bales of silk for easy trading. The difference: today's spice trade moves at the speed of a click. Saffron from Iran, once so precious it was locked in royal treasuries, now reaches your doorstep via Amazon Prime, following digital pathways that trace the very geography of ancient caravan stops. But the real magic lies in the intangibles. Just as Buddhism traveled from India to Japan via Silk Road monks, today's memes and viral trends hopscotch across continents in seconds. The Silk Road gave us papermaking, astrology, and even the concept of zero, game-changing innovations that spread through casual contact. Sound familiar? Silicon Valley's tech breakthroughs follow the same pattern, with Korean smartphones using German lenses and Japanese sensors before landing in Brazilian hands. Even the tensions feel ripped from history. Medieval cities taxed foreign merchants at dizzying rates, just as modern tariffs spark trade wars between nations jockeying for advantage. Perhaps the most poetic revival is happening in Uzbekistan, where Soviet-era roads are being reborn as new Silk Rail routes. Chinese trains loaded with electronics rumble past the ruins of Samarkand's Registan Square, where Marco Polo once haggled over jade. The goods have changed, but the script remains the same. Connectivity breeds prosperity, and isolation spells decline. When a startup in Nairobi sources fabric from Bangladesh and sells it to European buyers via Instagram, they're playing by rules written on scrolls 2,000 years ago. The past whispers a simple truth: we've always been global. We just keep rediscovering how to act like it. Centuries before chocolate became a supermarket staple, the Aztecs treated it as something sacred, a frothy, bitter elixir reserved for emperors and warriors. Drinking chocolate wasn't about indulgence, it was a ritual, a symbol of power and divine connection. Fast forward to today, and that same aura of exclusivity still clings to the finest chocolate bars, their marketing campaigns echoing ceremonies once performed in the courts of Moctezuma. The Aztecs didn't just consume cacao, they curated an experience, and modern chocolatiers have taken meticulous notes. Picture this: in Tenochtitlan, cacao beans were so valuable they doubled as currency, with a single bean buying a ripe avocado or a canoe ride across the lake. Only the elite could afford to drink it, mixed with chili, vanilla, and precious annatto to create a spicy, crimson brew served in golden goblets. Now flip through the glossy pages of a Valrhona or Mitchell Cluzel catalogue, and you'll spot the same strategy: limited edition single origin bars, wrapped like artifacts, their origins mythologized down to the soil type of the Venezuelan plantation they came from. The beans might not buy you a canoe anymore, but at $20 a bar, there's still a luxury few can casually afford. The parallels go deeper than price tags. Aztec merchants spun elaborate tales about cacao's divine origins, claiming the god Quetzalcoatl gifted it to humanity. Modern brands craft their own origin stories, with labels boasting of Mayan-inspired recipes or ancestral harvesting techniques, even when their factories are in Belgium. Mast Brothers, a Brooklyn-based chocolatier, faced backlash for exaggerating their bean-to-bar narrative, proof of how potent these myths remain. And just as Aztec nobles flaunted their chocolate drinking status in frescoes, today's influencers stage meticulously lit unboxings of artisanal truffles, turning consumption into performance. But the most striking echo lies in the sensory theater of it all. Aztec priests poured chocolate from great heights to create a frothy head, believing the bubbles carried prayers to the gods. Now watch a barista at a high-end chocolaterie shake a cocoa-infused cocktail with the same reverence, or a pastry chef dust edible gold over a ganache like it's a temple offering. The language hasn't changed much either. Aztec texts called chocolate, Yolotl Estli, or heart's blood, while modern ads describe 80% dark bars as intense, complex, even life-changing. Here's the twist: the Aztecs would have laughed at our sugar-laden confections. Their chocolate was bracing and bitter, often laced with hallucinogenic mushrooms for religious visions. Yet even our sweet tooth has roots in their rituals. Spanish conquerors, repulsed by the bitterness, added cane sugar and milk, creating the first luxury hybrid for European aristocracy. Every time you see a $20 box of truffles marketed as sinfully decadent, remember, you're not just buying chocolate. You're buying into a chain of desire that stretches back to emperors who believed cacao was the food of the gods. The vessels have changed, but the spell remains unbroken. When the first Olympic champion stood naked on the sands of Olympia in 776 BC, his prize wasn't a gold medal or a sneaker deal. It was a simple wreath of wild olive branches. Yet that humble symbol launched the very first sports marketing empire, proving that even in antiquity, victory was never just about glory. Those Greek games were steeped in commercial savvy, with city-states bankrolling athletes like modern franchises, poets composing victory odes that functioned as ancient endorsements, and winners cashing in on their fame through lifetime pensions and tax exemptions. The stadiums might have been made of dirt, but the business models surprisingly polished. Fast forward to today, and the script hasn't changed, only the scale. Where once a Spartan sprinter might earn a free meal for life at his local agora, Usain Bolt's record-breaking strides secured him deals with Puma and Virgin Media worth millions. The olive wreath has been replaced by sponsorship patches on jerseys, but the transaction remains the same. Excellence gets rewarded, and brands get association with greatness. Even the concept of amateurism, which the modern Olympics clung to until the 1980s, would have baffled ancient Greeks. Their athletes trained full-time, funded by patrons who expected returns on their investments. When a wrestler from Croton won 5 consecutive games, his hometown minted coins with his likeness, an ancient version of an athlete's signature shoe line. The real game-changer, though, was how Greek cities weaponized Olympic success. Victorious athletes weren't just celebrated, they were geopolitical tools. A single win could elevate a city-state's prestige, attracting traders and allies. Athens even passed laws granting Olympic champions front-row seats at public events and lifetime stipends, turning them into walking billboards for civic pride. Compare that to today's host cities pouring billions into infrastructure, banking on the games to boost tourism and global clout. The Rio Olympics might have featured LED-laced ceremonies instead of chariot races, but when the stands emptied, both eras faced the same question: was the spectacle worth the debt? Perhaps the most enduring legacy is the cult of the athlete. Greek poets like Pindar crafted victory odes so lavish they'd make modern press releases blush, immortalizing champions as demigods. Now scroll through any Olympic hashtag, and you'll see the same hero-making machinery at work. NBC profiles framing swimmers as modern-day Hercules, TikTok edits turning snowboarders into mythic rebels. Even the pitfalls mirror antiquity. When the sprinter Kyneska of Sparta exploited loopholes to win chariot races by hiring male drivers, it sparked debates about true athletic merit, echoes of today's controversies over professionalization and sponsorship skewing competition. The lesson: the Olympics were always a marketplace. The currency just evolved from olive oil to television rights, from poet laureates to influencer contracts. When Nike airbrushed its swoosh over the Berlin Marathon route in 1989 or Rolex timed Wimbledon matches, they weren't inventing anything new. They were channeling the same impulse that made Greek merchants shower winners with gifts, proving that while the tools of hype change, the hunger to monetize human excellence is truly timeless. Next time you see a gymnast's face on a cereal box, remember, the ancient Greeks would have approved. They wrote the playbook. Walking through the ruins of Pompeii, you might stumble across a site that feels bizarrely modern. A row of stone counters embedded with large clay jars, their interiors stained by traces of 2,000-year-old meals. These weren't storage cellars or ceremonial altars. They were the thermopolia, Pompeii's answer to fast food, proving that the craving for a quick, tasty bite on the go is anything but new. With over 80 of these snack bars uncovered in the city, it's clear ancient Romans loved their takeout as much as we do. The setup would feel familiar to any modern urbanite. Thermopolia lined busy streets, their counters opening directly to pedestrians, an ancient version of a food truck window inside those embedded jars. A rotating menu of hot dishes kept warm over charcoal fires. Imagine lentils stewed with garum, a fermented fish sauce that was the ketchup of its day, roasted meats, even honey-glazed sweets. Workers on lunch breaks, students between classes, and late-night revelers would crowd these spots, trading coins for ready-made meals. Sound like your last DoorDash order. The only real difference is the lack of an app, but the similarities run deeper than convenience. Just as today's takeout joints cluster near offices and transit hubs, Thermopolia strategically dotted Pompeii's busiest intersections. Archaeologists even found one just steps from the amphitheater, proof that nothing pairs with gladiator fights like a quick snack. The menus catered to local tastes too. Coastal Thermopolia served more seafood, while those near the Forum offered heartier fare for politicians burning the midnight oil. Modern food delivery algorithms would approve. Perhaps the most striking parallel is the branding. Many Thermopolia had colorful frescoes above their counters advertising specialties, like a painted chicken promoting their roast poultry or a jug of wine to showcase their house red. Some even had catchy names chiseled into their facades, to the Table of Fortunatus or at the Sign of the Bronze Bowl. It's the same psychology behind Starbucks seasonal cups or McDonald's Golden Arches visual cues that trigger cravings and loyalty across millennia. Here's where it gets poetic. In one Thermopolium, archaeologists found carbonized remains of a final meal still in its cookpot, abandoned when Vesuvius erupted. It contained duck, fish, and snails, a gourmet spread frozen in time. Today, that same intersection of urgency and indulgence lives on in our midnight taco runs and office lunch rushes. The containers have changed from clay jars to cardboard boxes, but the human impulse remains. Good food, fast, shared in the rhythm of daily life. The past doesn't just echo, it orders the same thing every time. Centuries before the term limited edition entered the luxury lexicon, Ming Dynasty artisans were already perfecting the art of exclusivity. Their porcelain wasn't just pottery, it was propaganda, a shimmering statement of power that traveled farther than any emperor's decree. Picture this: delicate blue and white vases, each brushstroke a whisper of cobalt oxide mixed with ground-up Persian gems, fired at temperatures hot enough to melt stone. These weren't mass-produced trinkets, they were diplomatic weapons gifted to foreign rulers to dazzle them into submission. Fast forward 600 years, and the same psychology fuels the Hermes Birkin frenzy or the months-long waitlists for a Rolex Daytona. The materials have changed, but the game remains identical. Scarcity equals desire, and desire equals status. What's fascinating is how Ming porcelain set the blueprint for modern luxury's most sacred rituals. Take the imperial kilns of Jingdezhen, where master potters worked in secrecy, destroying imperfect pieces to maintain an air of unattainable perfection. Sound familiar? It's the same ethos behind Chanel burning unsold handbags or Ferrari crushing prototypes to preserve exclusivity. Even the Ming practice of marking porcelain with reign-era seals proof of imperial approval, mirrors today's obsession with authenticity cards and holographic serial numbers. A 15th century, made-for-the-Yongle emperor stamp functioned exactly like a modern, handcrafted in Switzerland, engraving, not just a label but a talisman of worth. But the real magic lies in how both eras weaponized storytelling. Ming merchants spun tales of porcelain's mystical origins, claiming it took 42 steps to transform clay into something as thin as paper, as bright as a mirror. Modern brands deploy similar myth-making. Herm's leather workshops are shrouded in artisan mystique, while Patek Philippe's adds whisper. You never actually own a Patek. You merely look after it for the next generation. The psychology is identical: transform objects into heirlooms and consumers into temporary custodians of legacy. Here's where history throws a curveball. Ming porcelain's value skyrocketed when European aristocrats couldn't replicate its formula, sparking a centuries-long alchemical obsession. Today's luxury brands face the same dynamic with counterfeiting, except now the battle plays out in Guangzhou sweatshops instead of Medici palaces. The Ming solution: flood the market with export wear, subtly inferior copies that diluted knockoffs appeal while keeping true imperial pieces untouchably rare. It's a tactic straight out of Louis Vuitton's playbook, producing enough canvas bags to satisfy mass aspiration while reserving crocodile skin custom pieces for the elite. The most telling parallel, though, is in the emotional alchemy. A Ming vase wasn't just a container, it was a conversation piece that proclaimed, "I have access to what you don't." Flip through a Robb report today, and you'll find the same calculus: limited edition watches with production runs matching the Ming calendar's 60-year cycles, or hand-painted silk scarves channeling the same 5-color palette Ming nobles coveted. The past whispers a ruthless truth. True luxury isn't about the object. It's about the story it lets you tell about yourself, and the Ming dynasty wrote that script in cobalt and flame. Long before industrial farming turned soil into a commodity, Native American tribes had cracked the code to sustainable agriculture, not with machinery or chemicals, but with brilliant biological partnerships. The Three Sisters method, perfected over millennia by the Iroquois and other nations, wasn't just a planting technique, it was a masterclass in ecological harmony. Picture a field where corn stands tall like a living trellis, beans spiral up its stalks fixing nitrogen into the soil, and squash sprawls below, its broad leaves forming a living mulch that locks in moisture and chokes out weeds. This wasn't farming, it was a symphony. Fast forward to today, and organic growers from Vermont to California are rediscovering this ancient wisdom. Modern studies reveal the genius behind the trio. Corn provides structure for beans to climb, beans replenish soil nitrogen depleted by corn, and squash's prickly leaves deter pests naturally. Together, they yield 20% more calories per acre than monocultures while needing no synthetic fertilizers, a fact that's turning heads in an era of climate-conscious agriculture. At Cornell University, researchers documented Three Sisters plots outperforming conventional fields during droughts, thanks to that dense squash canopy conserving water. Even NASA has taken note, studying the system for potential use in Martian agriculture. But the revival isn't just about productivity, it's about philosophy. Indigenous farmers viewed the Three Sisters as sacred kin, celebrating their interdependence in ceremonies and oral traditions. Today's regenerative farmers echo that ethos, rejecting the idea of land as a factory. When a Wisconsin CSA farm plants its Three Sisters Guild, they're not just growing food, they're rebuilding relationships between crops, soil, and community. The proof: soil tests in these fields show microbial diversity rivaling old-growth forests, a stark contrast to the lifeless dirt of neighboring industrial farms. Here's where history gets ironic. Early European settlers initially dismissed the method as primitive, only to later adopt it during food shortages. Now, the same system is being repackaged as cutting-edge polyculture by agribusiness, often without crediting its origins. Yet some tribes are reclaiming their legacy. the Onondaga Nation hosts workshops teaching the original mound planting technique, where seeds are sown in nutrient-rich soil piles just as ancestors did. Meanwhile, chefs like Sean Sherman, Oglala Lakota, are putting Three Sisters dishes like tepary bean stew with blue cornbread back on gourmet menus, not as novelty, but as culinary revolution. The real lesson isn't just in the planting, it's in the perspective, where industrial agriculture sees competition crops fighting for space and resources. The Three Sisters teach collaboration. In a warming world where topsoil vanishes by the billions of tons yearly, that ancient blueprint might just hold the seeds of our survival. The past didn't just leave us a farming hack, it handed us a manifesto for coexistence. Romeo and Juliet's balcony scene might be over 400 years old, but you've probably watched its modern doppelganger without even realizing it. That meet cute where two star-crossed lovers lock eyes across a crowded party, the witty banter masking simmering tension, the rivals to lovers arc that ends in a grand gesture. Shakespeare didn't just write plays, he built the DNA of every rom-com in your Netflix queue. From the angsty teens of The Fault in Our Stars to the warring families in Crazy Rich Asians, the bard's fingerprints are everywhere, proving that when it comes to love and longing, we're all still speaking his language. Take the classic forbidden love trope. Juliet whispering, "A rose by any other name would smell as sweet," is the great-grandparent of every storyline where love bridges divides, whether it's race, class, or rival tech CEOs. The plot of West Side Story transplants Verona's feuding Montagues and Capulets to New York's gang-riddled streets, while 10 Things I Hate About You repackages the taming of the shrew as a high school battle of the sexes. Even Twilight, with its vampire-human Romeo and vampire-hating family Juliet, follows the same script, passion that defies reason, loyalty, and sometimes even survival instincts. The names and settings change, but the heartbeat of the story remains unchanged. Then there's Macbeth, a play so steeped in political ambition it could double as a White House thriller. The moment Macbeth hears the witch's prophecy and starts eyeing the throne, he sets the template for every power-hungry antihero we love to hate. House of Cards' Frank Underwood isn't just Machiavellian, he's Macbeth in a tailored suit, complete with monologues that might as well begin with, "Is this a dagger I see before me?" The parallels are uncanny. A charismatic leader swayed by a cunning partner, Claire, Lady Macbeth's spiritual successor, willing to step over bodies literal or metaphorical to stay on top. Even the slow unraveling, the paranoia that creeps in as the walls close in, feels lifted straight from Inverness Castle. But here's the twist. Shakespeare's real genius wasn't in creating these tropes, it was in exposing their universality. The themes that resonated in Elizabethan England still echo because they tap into raw human instincts: ambition, jealousy, the terror of losing power. When Succession's Logan Roy barks orders or Scandal's Olivia Pope spins webs of deceit, they're not just characters, they're modern avatars of Richard Roman III or Iago, proving that the politics of power haven't evolved much since the Globe Theatre stood on Bankside. The most fascinating adaptations, though, are the ones that flip the script. Get Out borrows Othello's tension outsider in a gilded world, whispers of betrayal, but subverts it with a horror twist. She's the Man turns Twelfth Night's gender bending into a soccer field farce. These aren't just copies, they're conversations where modern creators riff on Shakespeare's chords to compose something new. The bard's real legacy isn't in preserving his words under glass, it's in how freely we remix them, proving that the best stories aren't bound by time. They're blueprints waiting for the next generation to build them anew. When the Black Death swept through Europe in the mid-1400s, Venetian officials made a chilling decree. Ships arriving from infected ports had to anchor offshore for 40 days before anyone could step onto land. They called it quarantino, from the Italian word for 40, a grim birth certificate for the very concept of quarantine. 7 centuries later, as COVID-19 sent nations scrambling for defenses, that same number reappeared like a ghost. 14-day isolations became standard, a near-perfect echo of medieval logic. The tools had changed: rapid tests instead of leech-filled sickbays, contact tracing apps in place of guarded city gates, but the underlying principle remained identical: keep the sick apart from the healthy and wait. The parallels don't stop at timeframes. During the Black Death, rumors spread that the disease was caused by poisoned wells or vengeful spirits, leading to violent pogroms against Jewish communities and strangers. Fast forward to 2020, and misinformation moved at viral speed. Claims that 5G towers spread the virus or that bleach injections could cure it fueled panic and division. Both eras saw marginalized groups scapegoated. Then it was Jewish neighborhoods burned, now Asian-owned businesses vandalized. The mechanisms of fear, it seems, evolve far slower than the pathogens they chase. Yet the most haunting similarities lie in how each pandemic exposed societal fractures. In medieval Florence, the wealthy fled to country estates, leaving the poor to die in crowded tenements, a dynamic painfully familiar to those who watched elite neighborhoods access early vaccines while frontline workers risked exposure without protection. Boccaccio's Decameron, written in the plague's shadow, depicts nobles telling stories in secluded villas as bodies pile up outside, a tableau that could have inspired 2020's Zoom parties over overflowing ICUs. Even the economic aftermath mirrors eerily. Post-plague labor shortages led to peasant uprisings demanding fair wages, just as modern Great Resignations saw workers rejecting pre-pandemic exploitation. Perhaps the starkest difference is in our illusions of control. Medieval doctors wore beaked masks filled with herbs, believing bad air, miasma, spread disease. Today, we know about viruses, yet our N95s and social distancing couldn't halt the same cycles of denial and desperation. When archaeologists uncovered mass graves from the Black Death, they found bodies carefully spaced, proof that even then, people understood contagion's rules even if they didn't know why. 700 years later, with all our science, we still grappled with the same human impulses: to flee, to blame, to hope against evidence. The lesson isn't just that history repeats itself. It's that pandemics act like X-rays, exposing the bones of society beneath the skin. Whether it's 14th century Florence or 21st century New York, they test who gets protected, who gets sacrificed, and who writes the story when the dust settles. The past whispers a warning: the next plague won't just challenge our medicine, it'll test our humanity, and the grades are still out. In 1650, walking into an Ottoman coffee house was like stepping into a Twitter thread, a TD talk, and your local co-working space all at once, minus the laptops, of course. These dimly lit rooms, thick with the aroma of freshly roasted beans, weren't just places to drink coffee. They were intellectual battlegrounds where poets, scholars, and merchants clashed over politics, religion, and art. The drink itself was merely the excuse. Sound familiar? Today's cafes, with their baristas doubling as therapists and freelancers huddled over almond milk lattes, owe more to those smoky Istanbul gathering spots than they realize. The parallels are uncanny. Ottoman coffee houses were the original third spaces, not home, not work, but somewhere in between where social hierarchies temporarily dissolved. A janissary might debate a jeweler while a Sufi mystic scribbled poetry in the corner. This radical equality horrified the elites. Sultans periodically banned coffee houses, fearing they bred dissent. They weren't wrong. Compare that to modern crackdowns on cafe protests in places like Cairo or Istanbul, where a simple cup of coffee still carries whiffs of rebellion. Even the layout echoes. Ottoman benches arranged for conversation mirror today's communal tables, deliberately designed to nudge strangers into interaction. But the real legacy lies in coffee's role as a catalyst for ideas. The first Ottoman coffee houses popped up near universities and mosques, quickly becoming unofficial classrooms. Scholars would recite manuscripts aloud, sparking discussions that sometimes spilled into the streets. Fast forward to Vienna's Café Central, where Trotsky and Freud once argued over pastries, or Parisian cafes that incubated existentialism. The blueprint never changed just the beverages. When you see a startup founder sketching app designs in a Brooklyn coffee shop, they're channeling the same energy as a 16th century calligraphy master refining his craft over a ceramic cup. Here's the twist: coffeehouse culture also birthed modern misinformation. Ottoman authorities accused them of spreading false rumors, much like today's concerns over echo chambers in digital spaces. Patrons would share news from distant provinces, often exaggerated or invented over cardamom-infused brews. Sound like your uncle's conspiracy-laden Facebook rants. The medium has upgraded from whispers to Wi-Fi, but the human tendency to spin tales over caffeine remains unchanged. The most poetic revival is in the rituals. Ottoman servers poured coffee from brass sieves with theatrical flair, a precursor to today's hipster pour-over ceremonies. The slow, deliberate process wasn't just about taste, it forced pauses, creating natural breaks for reflection mid-debate. Next time you watch a barista painstakingly craft a heart in your foam, remember, that latte art descends from a tradition where every sip was meant to fuel deeper thought. The past doesn't just echo, it lingers like the grounds at the bottom of your cup. 2,500 years ago, the most powerful communication network on Earth wasn't made of fiber optic cables or satellite arrays. It was built on the speed of horses and the cunning of spies. The Persian Empire's royal road stretched over 1,600 miles, with relay stations stocked with fresh mounts every 15 miles, allowing messengers to cover the distance from Susa to Sardes in just 7 days. That might seem sluggish by modern standards, but for its time, it was the equivalent of hitting send on an email and watching it arrive across continents in real time. What's astonishing isn't just the speed, it's how many of its features foreshadowed the digital age. Take the concept of encryption. Persian dispatches weren't just rolled-up scrolls tied with string. They were often written in ciphers or even tattooed onto the shaved heads of messengers, hidden under regrown hair. Only the intended recipient, knowing the cipher key or willing to shear the courier's scalp, could decode the message. Sound familiar? Modern email encryption, with its public and private keys, operates on the same principle, just with fewer haircuts. Even the Persian practice of sealing messages with royal signet rings mirrors today's digital signatures, verifying authenticity while deterring tampering. But the real genius lay in the network's resilience. The royal road wasn't a single path but a web of routes, with alternate paths to circumvent bandits or bad weather. If one relay station fell, messages could be rerouted seamlessly, a dead ringer for how modern internet protocols bounce data packets around server outages. Persian engineers even built way stations with food, lodging, and spare horses, creating the ancient equivalent of server farms, keeping the system humming. When Alexander the Great conquered Persia, he didn't dismantle the system. He expanded it, proving even then that disrupting communication was political suicide. Fast forward to the 1960s, when ARPANET engineers designing the precursor to the internet drew inspiration from, you guessed it, distributed networks like Persia's. The logic was identical: avoid single points of failure, prioritize speed, and assume someone's always listening. Today's instant messages might travel at the speed of light instead of hoofbeats, but the underlying anxiety remains. Persian kings feared intercepted orders sparking revolts. Modern CEOs dread leaked emails tanking stock prices. The stakes change, the game doesn't. Perhaps the most poetic parallel is in the human impulse behind both systems. Persian couriers, or paradazish, were trained to shout their messages while still galloping, ensuring no time was lost, an ancient version of pressing reply all before your thoughts fully form. And just as today's Slack notifications demand instant responses, Herodotus recorded that Persian officials were expected to react to royal decrees with the same urgency, whether it was noon or midnight. Somewhere between the pounding hooves of the royal road and the ping of a push notification, we've been chasing the same illusion that faster communication means better control. The Persians just had the excuse of not knowing any better. The swirling, unbroken lines of a Celtic knot might seem like just another tattoo trend, but these ancient designs carry meanings deeper than ink. Long before Instagram aesthetics, Iron Age artisans carved these intricate patterns into stone crosses and jewelry, their endless loops symbolizing the interconnectedness of life and eternity. Today, those same motifs adorn the wrists, backs, and forearms of millennials and Gen Z, not as mere decoration, but as talismans of identity, resilience, and reclaimed heritage. The resurgence isn't accidental. In a world of disposable trends, Celtic knots offer something rare, a visual language older than nations, yet flexible enough to speak to modern souls. Walk into any tattoo parlor from Dublin to Tokyo, and you'll spot the signature braided bands, some bold and black, others threaded with color like contemporary Book of Kells pages. But what's striking isn't their popularity, it's the personal stories they've come to embody. A college student in Boston might choose a trinity not to honor their Irish immigrant grandparents, while a Norwegian designer opts for a Dara knot's oak root pattern as a reminder of strength during burnout. The symbols, once etched by monks into illuminated manuscripts, now serve as armor against modern alienation, their permanence contrasting sharply with the digital ephemerality of daily life. Archaeologists would recognize the irony. Original Celtic knots weren't just art, they were spiritual maps believed to ward off evil spirits when carved into doorways or shields. Modern wearers channel a similar energy, using tattoos as shields against anxiety or loss. The endless knot, once representing the cyclical nature of time, now resonates with climate activists protesting linear exploitation of resources. Even the placement echoes tradition where Celts adorned their bodies with woad dye for battle. Today's ink becomes a quiet rebellion against societal pressures to conform. Yet the revival isn't just about nostalgia. Contemporary artists are pushing the form into new territory, blending knotwork with biomechanical designs or splicing them with geometric patterns. A tattooist in Edinburgh might reimagine a traditional spiral as a DNA helix, while a Brooklyn studio fuses Ogham script with subway graffiti. This innovation mirrors how Celtic art itself evolved, absorbing Viking and Christian influences while keeping its core identity intact. The past isn't being copied, it's collaborating with the present. The most profound shift, though, lies in who gets these tattoos. Where once they might have been gatekept by those with provable Celtic ancestry, now they're claimed by anyone drawn to their symbolism. A Japanese chef with no European roots might ink a shield knot for protection, just as a Mexican-American poet adopts a salmon of wisdom for creativity. This universality reflects a hunger for connection in fractured times, proof that some patterns transcend borders, their meaning rewoven with every fresh needle stroke. The knots haven't just survived, they've become living conversations between eras, their loops eternally open to new interpretations. 700 years before the European Union forged its economic alliance, another powerhouse was rewriting the rules of trade across borders without a single treaty or bureaucratic office. The Hanseatic League, a loose network of merchant guilds stretching from London to Novgorod, didn't need flags or formal institutions to dominate commerce. Their weapon, mutual interest. At its peak, this medieval coalition controlled trade routes so vital that kings begged for access, and cities prospered or withered based on their membership. The parallels to today's EU aren't just coincidental, they're a masterclass in how history's greatest collaborations repeat themselves. Picture the bustling docks of 14th century Lübeck, where German wool met Russian furs and Flemish cloth. Hanseatic merchants didn't just trade goods, they traded privileges, cutting deals to exempt each other from tolls. standardizing weights and measures, even maintaining shared fleets to patrol against pirates. Sound familiar? It's the medieval blueprint for the EU's single market, where tariffs vanish and trucks roll through borders without stopping. The League's contours, fortified trading posts in cities like Bruges and Bergen, functioned like early versions of Brussels' regulatory bodies, enforcing quality controls on everything from Baltic timber to Norwegian stockfish. When a merchant violated rules, they faced exclusion from the entire network, a fate as economically devastating as modern EU sanctions. But the Hanseatic League's real innovation was its flexibility. Unlike top-down empires, it operated as a federation of free cities, each retaining autonomy while pooling resources for collective gain. Bruges could negotiate local contracts, but when pirates threatened shipping lanes, the League's combined navies responded. Compare that to the EU's principle of subsidiarity, where decisions are made at the most local level possible until crises like the migrant influx or banking collapses demand united action. Even the League's famous Hanseatic days, where delegates met to hash out disputes, foreshadowed the European Council summits, where Macron and Scholes now debate fiscal policy over espressos instead of ale. The threats they faced were eerily similar too. When King Edward Roman IV of England tried slapping taxes on Hanseatic wool in 1469, the League retaliated with a trade embargo so severe it crashed London's economy. Centuries later, the EU wielded the same tactic against Russian gas, proving that economic alliances have always been both shields and swords. Even the League's decline holds lessons when member cities like Cologne began prioritizing individual gains over collective stability. The network fractured. Historians might as well be describing Brexit or Hungary's isolationist moves when they trace how self-interest unraveled centuries of cooperation. Yet the most enduring legacy lies in the cultural ties woven through trade. Hanseatic routes didn't just move goods, they spread ideas from Gothic architecture to legal codes, knitting together a shared Northern European identity. Today's Erasmus students studying in Barcelona or Polish plumbers working in Dublin are living that same exchange, proving that when borders soften, people and ideas flow where they're most needed. The League's motto, Concordia Domi Foris Pax Harmony at Home, Peace abroad, could easily grace an EU Parliament building. The players have changed, but the game remains. Prosperity thrives not behind walls, but across bridges. The bubbling flasks and cryptic symbols of medieval alchemists might seem like the stuff of fantasy, but beneath the mysticism lay something far more revolutionary, the seeds of modern chemistry. Those obsessed seekers hunched over their furnaces, desperately trying to turn lead into gold, weren't just wasting time with magic. They were laying the groundwork for every pharmaceutical lab, every polymer factory, even the smartphone in your pocket. The irony, their greatest triumph wasn't transmuting metals, it was transforming humanity's understanding of matter itself. Take something as simple as distillation, a technique alchemists like Maria the Jewess perfected around the 3rd century. Her intricate glassware, designed to purify liquids through heating and cooling, became the ancestor of every refinery and essential oil extractor today. Modern chemists still use her basic principles to isolate compounds, whether it's penicillin from mold or ethanol for fuel. Even the alchemists' beloved mortar and pestle, used to grind minerals into powders, find their high-tech descendants in ball mills that nano-engineer materials for everything from solar panels to cancer drugs. But the real alchemical legacy lies in persistence. Centuries of trial and error documented in cryptic manuscripts filled with sulfur symbols and dragon imagery yielded accidental discoveries we now take for granted. When Paracelsus experimented with mercury compounds in the 1500s, hoping to cure syphilis, he had no idea he was pioneering toxicology. Fast forward to today, and mercury-based compounds are used in precision thermometers and fluorescent lights. Even the alchemists' obsession with acids like nitric and sulfuric, paved the way for industrial-scale fertilizer production, without which modern agriculture would collapse. Perhaps the most poetic transition is in pharmaceuticals. Alchemists sought the elixir of life, a potion to grant immortality. They never found it, but their methods birthed something better: synthetic medicine. The same steps used to purify quintessence, a mythical fifth element, now isolate active ingredients in drugs like aspirin, originally derived from willow bark. When a lab today catalogs thousands of chemical reactions to develop a new antiviral, they're running the same playbook as alchemists testing endless herbal tinctures, just with robots and mass spectrometers instead of alembics. The true transmutation wasn't lead to gold. It was curiosity into knowledge, mysticism into methodology. Next time you pop a painkiller or charge a lithium-ion battery, remember, you're holding the philosopher's stone. It just looks like science now. The cross-legged figure of the Indus Valley yogi carved into a 5,000-year-old soapstone seal doesn't just depict a man in meditation. It captures a revolution in human consciousness that's still unfolding. What began as an ascetic discipline along the banks of the Saraswati River has morphed into a multi-billion-dollar global phenomenon, with Silicon Valley CEOs chanting mantras between board meetings and Instagram influencers balancing in handstands on tropical beaches. The journey from sacred ritual to corporate wellness hack is more than cultural appropriation. It's proof that ancient solutions still resonate in our frantic modern lives. Look at any high-powered tech campus today, and you'll find yoga studios tucked between ping-pong tables and nap pods. Google's Search Inside Yourself program, designed to boost employee productivity through mindfulness, leans heavily on pranayama breathing techniques straight from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Wall Street traders now use corporate yoga sessions to manage stress, their tailored suits swapped for stretchy athleisure as they flow through sun salutations once reserved for saffron-robed satyrs. The irony: these adaptations often strip away yoga's spiritual core, repackaging it as a productivity tool. Yet even in diluted form, the benefits remain undeniable. Studies from Harvard to the Mayo Clinic confirm what yogis knew millennia ago. Controlled breath lowers cortisol, focused movement eases chronic pain, and meditation rewires neural pathways for resilience. But the most fascinating evolution is in how social media hijacked yoga's visual language. Scroll through TikTok's #Yogivaridam Day, and you'll see handstands staged against Santorini sunsets or contortionists folding themselves into human pretzels. A far cry from yoga's original purpose of quieting the ego. The ancient Hatha Yoga Pradipika warned against showing off advanced poses, yet today's influencer economy thrives on exactly that spectacle. Platforms reward the most photogenic chakrasana backbends, not the humble, introspective practice of watching one's breath. Still, there's beauty in this paradox, a 5,000-year-old discipline flexible enough to survive both commercialization and #culture, its essence somehow intact beneath the glittery surface. Perhaps the most profound echo lies in yoga's therapeutic revival. Modern physiotherapists now prescribe yoga for everything from scoliosis to PTSD, validating what Ayurvedic healers documented centuries ago. The warrior pose, once used to build physical and spiritual stamina, now aids veterans coping with trauma, while prenatal yoga classes repurpose ancient pelvic floor exercises for modern mothers. Even the science of vagus nerve stimulation, today's buzzword for stress relief, mirrors yoga's focus on the throat and diaphragm through practices like Ujjayi breath. The difference: we now have fMRI scans showing how chanting Om synchronizes brain waves, giving empirical weight to traditions passed down through oral lineages. Yet the past whispers a caution. Early yogis saw their practice as a path to enlightenment, not a quick fix for burnout. The Bhagavad Gita describes yoga as skill in action, a mindset, not just a workout. As studios market beer yoga and goat yoga, Purists argue whether we've lost the plot, but history suggests otherwise. Yoga has always adapted, from the forest-dwelling rishis to the medieval tantric schools that embraced householder life. Its genius lies in meeting seekers where they are, whether that's a Himalayan cave or a soul cycle studio. The next time you unroll a mat, remember, you're not just stretching. You're stepping onto a living bridge between eternity and the present, where every inhale carries the wisdom of ages. Gothic cathedrals and modern skyscrapers might be separated by centuries, but their silhouettes tell the same story, a human obsession with scraping the sky. When you stand beneath the vaulted ceilings of Notre Dame or crane your neck at the Chrysler Building's Art Deco spire, you're witnessing two eras reaching for the divine with the same restless ambition. Medieval architects had no steel girders or elevators, yet they engineered stone prayers that defied gravity, their ribbed vaults and flying buttresses channeling heavenward thrust. Today's glass towers achieve the same dizzying heights with sleeker materials, but the impulse remains unchanged: build tall and let the world marvel. The key to this aerial dance lies in the skeleton. Gothic cathedrals distributed weight through external buttresses, freeing interior walls from structural duty so they could dissolve into stained glass. Skyscrapers pull the same trick with steel cores and curtain walls, different tech, identical logic. Chartres Cathedral's nave soars because its forces leap outward to stone braces. The Willis Tower in Chicago does the same with bundled tubes that shift loads to its perimeter. Both designs turn buildings into lacework, stone or steel spun thin enough to let light flood through, yet sturdy enough to laugh off storms, but the parallels go deeper than engineering. Those Gothic spires weren't just feats of craftsmanship, they were billboards for faith, visible for miles to draw pilgrims, the Chrysler Building's chrome crown. A secular sermon proclaiming corporate might. Even the ornamentation speaks the same language, leafy grotesques on medieval gargoyles mirrored by the stainless steel eagles perched on the Chrysler's setbacks, both serving as talismans of identity and power. The difference: where cathedral stonemasons carved saints to ward off evil, skyscraper artisans welded hubcaps and radiator caps into metallic sunbursts, sacred iconography swapped for the liturgy of the machine age. Here's where history throws a curveball. While Gothic architects worked anonymously, toiling for generations on projects they'd never see finished, skyscraper builders race against profit margins. Yet both grapple with the same existential question: how high is too high? In 1284, Beauvais Cathedral's vaults collapsed from overreach, a medieval cautionary tale. In 1931, New York's zoning laws capped towers' bulk after shadows choked the streets below. Every era meets its vertical limits, not just from physics, but from the collective realization that ambition needs grounding. The real magic lies in the light play. Gothic architects choreographed sunlight through jewel-toned windows, turning congregations into participants in a luminous drama. Modernists achieve similar theatre with glass curtain walls. Think of the Gherkin in London, its diamond-paned skin refracting clouds like a secular kaleidoscope. Even the shadows align. The towering nave of Cologne Cathedral casts a cross-shaped imprint on the plaza, just as the Empire State's Art Deco setbacks carve geometric patterns into Manhattan's grid. The materials evolve, but the choreography of sun and structure remains sacred. Perhaps the most poignant echo is in the labor. The anonymous masons who hoisted Chartres blocks with ropes and pulleys would recognize the high iron workers photographed lunching on a beam during the Rockefeller Center's construction. Both groups suspended between earth and ether, building monuments to eras they might not live to see completed. The difference: today's workers wear harnesses, not faith, as their safety net. Yet when dusk hits just right and a skyscraper's glass facade mirrors the rose window of a nearby cathedral, time collapses. The past didn't just inspire, it handed us a blueprint for reaching beyond our grasp. Whether with stone or steel, we keep building upward, chasing that same fleeting glimpse of the infinite. Napoleon never had a Twitter account, but he'd have been devastatingly good at it. The man who famously said, "History is a set of lies agreed upon," didn't just conquer Europe, he mastered the art of controlling his image with ruthless precision. From commissioning heroic portraits that shaved years off his age to staging grand entrances designed to go viral, if 18th century France had memes, Napoleon's propaganda machine was the ancestor of every modern politician's social media team. The parallels between his curated persona and today's Instagram-ready leadership are so striking, it's almost eerie. Take his most famous portrait by Jacques-Louis David, Napoleon crossing the Alps. The reality, he rode a mule in miserable weather. The painting, a thunderous stallion, wind-swept cape, and a leader so radiant he might as well be glowing. Today's equivalent, a politician's Instagram post carefully angled, perfectly filtered, and stripped of any inconvenient truths. The only difference is the medium. Where Napoleon relied on oil paint and printing presses, modern leaders have Photoshop and algorithmic boosts, but the goal is identical: shape perception, manufacture grandeur, and make the manufactured feel inevitable. Then there's the viral messaging. Napoleon understood the power of simple, repeatable slogans long before hashtags existed. Liberty, equality, fraternity wasn't just a motto, it was a soundbite plastered on coins, pamphlets, and even military uniforms. Compare that to today's political branding. Think of Obama's Hope posters or Trump's Make America Great Again caps. Both eras weaponized brevity, distilling complex ideologies into phrases so sticky they spread like cultural wildfire. Napoleon's bulletins from the front lines, dramatic, self-aggrandizing dispatches, were the 18th century version of a leader live tweeting a war, each word crafted to stoke admiration or fear. But the real genius was in targeting. Napoleon didn't just broadcast, he tailored. For the Parisian elites, he played the enlightened reformer, founding academies and commissioning operas. For the troops, a comrade in arms, sharing their hardships or at least appearing to. Modern politicians run the same playbook: LinkedIn posts for business crowds, TikTok dances for Gen Z, folksy kitchen table live streams for Middle America. The algorithm didn't create this fragmentation. It just automated what Napoleon did manually, slicing audiences into niches and feeding each a customized fantasy. The most chilling parallel, though, is in the suppression of dissent. Napoleon's police monitored cafes for gossip, jailing those who spread malicious rumors about his reign. Today, authoritarian regimes deploy troll farms to drown out critics, while even democratic leaders quietly flag misinformation that undermines their narratives. The tools have upgraded from informants to AI-driven sentiment analysis, but the impulse remains: control the story and you control the power. Yet there's a twist. Napoleon's propaganda, for all its cunning, couldn't stop his eventual downfall. The same fragility haunts modern leaders: one leaked DM, one unguarded hot mic moment, and the curated facade crumbles. The past whispers a warning: spin too hard and the truth spins back. Whether it's a cannonball at Waterloo or a trending hashtag, no amount of branding can hold back reality forever. Long before GPS satellites circled the Earth, Polynesian voyagers were navigating the Pacific's vast expanse with nothing but the stars, waves, and their own finely tuned instincts. These master navigators could sail thousands of miles across open ocean without compasses or charts. By reading the subtle language of nature, the angle of rising stars, the patterns of swells, even the flight paths of birds. Today's satellite systems may seem worlds apart from those ancestral techniques, but the quest for precision in navigation binds these eras together in unexpected ways. Both represent humanity's relentless drive to conquer the unknown, using the best tools available, whether carved wooden sticks or atomic clocks orbiting in space. The heart of Polynesian wayfinding lies in the star compass, a mental map dividing the horizon into 32 directional houses marked by celestial bodies. Navigators like Piailug, who famously guided the Hokulea canoe from Hawaii to Tahiti in 1976 using traditional methods, could pinpoint their location by memorizing the zenith stars over each island. If the star Hokupa Polaris sat too high in the sky, they'd sailed too far north. If the Southern Cross dipped low, they'd drifted south. This celestial intuition mirrors the triangulation math behind GPS, where receivers calculate position by measuring signals from multiple satellites. The tools differ, but the principle is identical, anchoring yourself in space by referencing fixed points in the heavens. Even wave piloting, another Polynesian technique, finds echoes in modern tech. Navigators trained for years to recognize how ocean swells refract around islands, creating interference patterns as detectable as runway lights. Today's sonar and LiDAR systems apply similar physics, mapping seafloors or urban landscapes by analyzing how energy waves scatter. The key difference: Polynesians relied on their feet to feel these vibrations through the canoe's hull, an organic sensor array no less sophisticated than the accelerometers in your smartphone. The real surprise is how these ancient methods are now correcting modern technology. In 2019, researchers discovered that Polynesian navigators could detect subtle ocean currents missed by satellite altimeters, leading to more accurate climate models. Meanwhile, NASA studies traditional wayfinding to improve emergency navigation systems for astronauts, proving that sometimes the past holds data even satellites can't see. Yet the deepest parallel lies in trust. Polynesians viewed navigation as a dialogue with nature, where clouds gathering over distant islands or the sudden presence of certain fish species offered clues. Modern GPS users, glued to turn-by-turn alerts, have largely lost this sensory awareness until the system fails. That's why the U.S. Navy now trains officers in celestial navigation as a backup, and why survival schools teach star compass techniques. The lesson is clear: no matter how advanced our tools become, true wayfinding demands more than algorithms. It requires the human capacity to observe, adapt, and when the stars align, find our way home. Imagine a fabric so rare, emperors paid soldiers with it, and kingdoms rose and fell over its secrets. For centuries, Chinese silk wasn't just a textile. It was currency, diplomacy, and power spun into threads finer than a spider's web. The process was sacred. Mulberry leaves hand-fed to silkworms, their cocoons boiled with precision to unspool a single filament that could stretch for half a mile. A single robe might take 2,000 cocoons and months of labor, woven on looms so complex their designs resembled flowing water or mountain mist. Fast forward to today, where that same allure of silk has been commodified into $10 blouses hanging in fast fashion racks, a transformation that reveals not just how far we've come, but what we've sacrificed to get here. The gulf between ancient and modern textiles isn't just about speed, it's about soul. Imperial silk workshops in Suzhou employed master weavers who spent decades perfecting Kessi tapestry, threading gold into scenes so intricate they were called woven paintings. These artisans weren't workers, they were cultural custodians, their hands preserving techniques passed down since the Han Dynasty. Contrast that with today's garment factories, where workers race against algorithms dictating stitch-per-minute quotas, churning out polyester, silk-look pieces designed to last a season before disintegrating in landfills. The difference isn't just quality, it's the very definition of value. Where one era measured fabric in artistry and legacy, the other counts pennies per yard and Instagram likes per wear. But the true cost of this shift isn't just aesthetic, it's etched into the earth and human lives. Traditional sericulture was cyclical. Mulberry trees nourished silkworms whose waste fertilized the soil, creating a closed-loop system that sustained villages for generations. Modern synthetic alternatives like rayon, marketed as vegan silk, rely on chemically dissolving wood pulp in toxic solvents like carbon disulfide, poisoning waterways from Indonesia to India. Even real silk, now mass-produced, has dark threads, Reports from silk reeling factories in China reveal workers enduring 12-hour shifts in steamy rooms, their fingers raw from handling boiling cocoons, all to meet luxury brands' insatiable demand. The tragic irony, many of these laborers could never afford the scarves they helped produce, their reality mirroring the cotton field injustices of the Industrial Revolution. Yet there's a flicker of hope in the backlash. A new wave of designers is reviving slow silk, partnering with Chinese cooperatives using heritage looms and organic dye vats. Brands like Archaeology in India blend ancient weaving with regenerative farming, while blockchain projects now trace silk back to ethical sericulture villages, proving luxury needn't come with exploitation. Even technology plays a role. Bioengineers are culturing silk proteins in labs, offering guilt-free shimmer without a single silkworm harmed. These innovations aren't just nostalgic, they're necessary. When a single fast fashion order can guzzle enough water to sustain a family for years, the past whispers an urgent lesson. Some things were never meant to be rushed. The next time you touch a slip of silk, ask not just how it feels, but how many hands and histories it carries in its weave. 2,000 years ago, beneath the towering oaks of Gaul and Britain, Druidic priests performed rituals so sacred that even Roman conquerors hesitated to interrupt them. These weren't just ceremonies, they were acts of communion with nature, where trees were worshipped as living deities and groves became open-air temples. Fast forward to today, and that same reverence pulses through modern environmental movements, from the rewilding of Scotland's highlands to the legal recognition of rivers as living entities in New Zealand. The connection isn't poetic coincidence, it's proof that some truths about humanity's bond with the earth transcend time. Take the sacred groves themselves. Druids believed these patches of ancient forest were thresholds to the divine, places where the veil between worlds grew thin. Cutting a tree from such a grove wasn't just logging, it was sacrilege punishable by curses or worse. Now zoom out to 21st century Europe, where organizations like Rewilding Britain are buying up deforested land, not to farm or develop, but to simply let nature reclaim its dominion. The Knepp estate in West Sussex, once struggling farmland, now teems with free-roaming deer, storks, and even stinging nettles, all because its owners embraced the radical idea that land thrives when left to its own rhythms. The parallels are uncanny. Both movements treat wilderness not as a resource but as a sacred trust, but the echoes grow louder when you examine the tactics. Druids used oral traditions and seasonal festivals to teach sustainable foraging, harvesting mistletoe with golden sickles so the host tree remained unharmed, or taking only one in every 3 hazelnuts to ensure regrowth. Modern conservationists wield scientific studies instead of folklore, but the principle is identical. The leave no trace ethos of today's national parks mirrors Druidic taboos against polluting springs or overhunting. Even the concept of Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing, now a globally recommended therapy for stress, would have felt familiar to a Druid who understood that immersion in green spaces healed the spirit long before cortisol levels were measured. Perhaps the most profound revival lies in legal activism. In 2017, New Zealand's Wanganui River became the first in the world to be granted legal personhood, a recognition rooted in Maori beliefs that rivers are ancestors, not property. Colombia followed suit, granting rights to the Amazon rainforest as a living entity. These aren't just policy shifts, they're a seismic return to indigenous worldviews that Druids would have recognized instantly. When a judge rules that a river has the right to flow and be pollution-free, it channels the same conviction that once made Celts swear oaths by streams and punish harm to them as murder. Yet for all the progress, there's a painful irony. Many modern conservationists championing these ideas unknowingly walk paths first cleared by peoples their ancestors displaced. The very word Druid conjures images of white-robed figures in misty glens, but the reality was more nuanced. These were the scientists and philosophers of their age, mapping star cycles and herbal remedies with precision. Today's rewilding advocates often rediscover, through satellite imagery and soil samples, what Druids knew from generations of observation, that ecosystems self-regulate when humans stop imposing order. The past whispers a humbling lesson. Sometimes the most advanced wisdom is the oldest. The next time you walk through a protected forest or pause to listen to birdsong in a city park, remember, you're not just enjoying nature. You're participating in a tradition as ancient as stone circles, one that insists the earth isn't ours to conquer, but to converse with. The Druids may be gone, but their groves still speak, if we're willing to hear them. Step into the Hagia Sophia, and your eyes will immediately be drawn upward where a sea of gold shimmers with countless tiny tiles, each no larger than your fingernail. These Byzantine mosaics, crafted between the 4th and 15th centuries, didn't just decorate sacred spaces. They were acts of devotion, built piece by painstaking piece to form celestial visions of saints and emperors. Now open your favorite retro video game, say Stardew Valley or Celeste, and you'll spot the same magic at work. Those pixelated characters, rendered in blocks of color as deliberate as any medieval tessera, follow an artistic lineage older than the Crusades. The link isn't just superficial. Both mediums rely on constrained grids to trick the eye into seeing depth and motion where none exists. Byzantine artisans arranged glass and stone tesserae at precise angles to catch light, creating the illusion of halos glowing from within. Modern pixel artists employ dithering, alternating colored dots to simulate shadows and textures on screens limited to 16-bit palettes. The techniques mirror each other, where a 6th century mosaicist might use a row of white tesserae to suggest the curve of a robe. A game designer in the 1980s would line up cyan and magenta pixels to imply metallic sheen on a spaceship. The difference: one required scaffolding and wet mortar, while the other needed lines of code. What's truly fascinating is how both art forms turn limitation into innovation. Byzantine mosaics thrived despite the fragility of their materials, gold leaf sandwiched between glass, prone to cracking. Just as early game developers worked within the confines of 8-bit processors. The Deci's mosaic in Istanbul's Kora Church uses jagged, irregular tesserae to render Christ's face with haunting realism, while Super Mario Bros. Blocky Plumber somehow conveys expressions through a few well-placed pixels. Both demand the viewer's brain to fill in the gaps, transforming abstraction into emotion. But the parallels go deeper than aesthetics. Byzantine mosaics were collaborative. Teams of artisans labored for months on a single panel, much like modern indie game studios pooling talents to craft pixel art worlds. And just as mosaics told biblical stories to illiterate congregations, pixel art became the visual language of a digital generation, conveying narratives without words. The Mother series' pixelated tears hit as hard as the anguish in Ravenous Theodora mosaic, proving that emotional resonance doesn't depend on resolution. Here's where history loops back on itself. Contemporary artists like Ben Radatz now create pixel murals inspired explicitly by Byzantine works, using LED tiles that recall the Hagia Sophia's golden glow. Meanwhile, preservationists employ 3D scanning to reconstruct shattered mosaics, ironically, using the same grid-based algorithms that power pixel art software. The past and present aren't just echoing, they're collaborating across centuries, united by the belief that grandeur can emerge from the humblest fragments. Whether it's a saint's face in Smalty or a spaceship in 16-bit, the message is the same. Art isn't about how much you have to work with, it's about what you build from it. From the Roman roads beneath our highways to the samurai code shaping corporate boardrooms, history doesn't just repeat itself, it hums beneath the surface of everything we call modern. These 30 echoes are more than curiosities, they're proof that human ingenuity, ambition, and even our flaws follow patterns deeper than time. When you see a politician spinning their image like Napoleon or a barrister crafting latte art with the same precision as an Ottoman coffee server, you're witnessing a conversation across centuries. The past isn't a dead artifact, it's a living blueprint, tweaked and adapted but never entirely discarded. What makes these connections thrilling isn't just the aha moment of recognition, it's the humility they inspire. The Vikings navigating by starlight and the engineers plotting Mars landings share the same restless spirit. The alchemists boiling mercury in search of immortality and the biochemists designing mRNA vaccines are driven by identical questions. Even our struggles, whether medieval peasants demanding fair wages or gig workers unionizing via WhatsApp, reveal how certain battles transcend eras. History's echoes remind us that progress isn't linear. It's a spiral where we keep circling back to refine old ideas with new tools. But here's the real gift. Spotting these threads turns the world into a scavenger hunt. Suddenly, a corset on a runway isn't just fashion. It's a rebellion stitched with centuries of meaning. A pixelated video game character winks at Byzantine mosaics. Every highway, every jury verdict, even your morning coffee carries layers of stories waiting to be unpicked. The more you notice, the richer the present becomes. So now it's your turn. What echoes have you spotted? A phrase, a tradition, a technology that feels oddly familiar? Drop your discoveries in the comments. Let's keep this conversation stretching across time. Because the best thing about history's whispers, the more we listen, the